Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, March 22nd, 2026, and this is show number 1089. We have a fantastic show today thanks to Scott Willsey, Bruce from Tennessee, and Steve. Adam Engst and I have a thoughtful conversation for you, too. But before we get into that, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on how I'm doing after the big hip surgery of 2026. The good news is that every single day I find something I could do that I couldn't do right after the surgery or even just a few days before. Just being able to lift my leg when sitting in a chair seems like a small thing, but being able to do it now when I couldn't do it 2 weeks ago it's astonishing. How do you put on a pair of shorts if you can't lift your foot, even sitting? I can now sleep on my right, good side for nearly 45 minutes before it starts to hurt, while a week ago the left hip hurt way too much to do even that. I can take unsupervised showers now with a shower chair. That kind of gives me some of my dignity back. I have physical therapy rehab at home twice a week, which isn't nearly as often as I wanted, but my PT guy, Chris, is really good at his job. What I like is he listens to me and what I want to accomplish, and then he starts working me towards that. For example, until only recently, it was very painful to get in and out of bed. Something about the twisting motion required caused shooting pains in my hip joint. I told him about it, and he showed me a way to get out of bed pain-free. Now, I didn't end up needing his trick for very long because, for some reason, that doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt to get out of bed. But I sure appreciated it for the few days I needed his method. Wish I'd asked him sooner. As I mentioned before, I propel myself around the house with a walker where I'm only allowed to balance on my left toe and then full weight on my right leg. They call this toe-touch weight bearing. I'm stuck in this mode until April 1st, and then I can finally start walking on the bad leg. I will still have to use a walker, mostly for stability. That won't be nearly as annoying, but it's to last for another 8 weeks. Not looking forward to that. While I'm really looking forward to not having the entire weight of my body on my arms, using a walker at all times means that it's incredibly difficult to carry anything. For example, after Steve has made our meal, since I can't really help him, he has to carry all of the dishes over to the table. Then he has to clear all of the dishes at the other end. He's not complaining, but I bet this is getting pretty old for him as well. I do have a couple of assistive tech tools that help me with this, although I may be stretching the word tech to its extremes. While I was in the rehab hospital, my occupational therapist, Jen, suggested Steve bring in one of those white plastic bags you get at the grocery store if you forget to bring your own. We modified it a little bit to have it hang off the side of the walker, and that at least let me carry a few things around. Before I left the rehab hospital, it occurred to me that perhaps technology existed for this exact problem to be solved that was a little bit more elegant than a plastic bag. On Amazon, I found the Rhino Valley Walker Basket. This is a rectangular open canvas basket that's around 16 inches across, 6 inches thick, and about 10 inches deep, and it weighs less than a pound. It connects to the walker via a series of Velcro straps. In the picture on Amazon, the front of the walker is a straight bar. I don't think any walkers are straight at the front. They're normally arced out to make room for your body to move forward, and that's what mine looks like. As a result, it doesn't fit nearly as cleanly as it looks in the images, but it gets the job done. The Rhino Valley Walker Basket also sports little slot pockets on the front to hold things like phones, notebooks, and pens, as well as a circular pocket for a water bottle. I happen to use a fairly small diameter water bottle that I got from the fine folks at 1Password, but if you have one of the larger ones, it definitely won't fit. Likewise, it's very unlikely that you own a phone that would fit into any of these little slot pockets. I tend to use the large cavern just to throw things into and then carry them across the room and put them away. This means I can, pick up my own laundry and maybe carry something back to the kitchen if it doesn't have any liquid in it. It's definitely limited, but it provides me with some autonomy, like being able to carry my own clothes to the shower. The main reason I wanted to bring up this basket is because of those useless thin slots at the front. I figured out a perfect use for them. Before my injury, if I needed to get up in the middle of the night, I could usually make it to the bathroom and back without running into anything. However, you may remember a few years ago when I broke my toe stubbing it on the table that's at the foot of our bed. And, just executing that tough maneuver of walking to the bathroom, it isn't without its dangers. Being in my more delicate condition now, tripping over a dog toy or a cat in the middle of the night would be catastrophic. I clearly needed a light source, but I wanted one that didn't wake up Steve. I use a case on my iPhone made by a company called Taurus that I've told you about in the past. The reason I like the Taurus cases is that they have a little pop-out ring that you can use as a way to secure the phone in your hand or to create a little stand. It turns out that I can slide that little ring partially open into the front of the walker, which then faces the iPhone screen forward in front of me. If I tap on the phone without unlocking it, it lights up. It's not bright like having the phone on, but it's just light enough to give me a little beacon to help me make my way to the bathroom and back safely, and it doesn't awaken Steve. Remember last week or the week before, I told you about a nifty hip kit that we bought that included such amazing technology as the sock aid? If you missed that excitement, I put a link to the article in the show notes so you can make sure you check that out too. In that article, I neglected to mention the handiest thing that was in that kit. It's called a grabber reacher tool. This is a 32-inch long tool that has a pistol grip on one end that you squeeze. When you do that, 2 fingers pull together with a rubber grip at the other end. I've seen these advertised on TV for years, and I always thought it was silly, but I probably use this 5 or 6 times a day. One of the reasons it's so useful is that you can easily collapse it to half of its full length. It actually fits inside my little walker basket when it's collapsed. I can pick up anything light, including Kepler's toys that he is wont to leave about the floor, and I can kind of fling them toward the basket. My accuracy isn't great, but at least it gets them out of my way. Picking up clothes is easier, but heavier things can be a challenge with the grabber reacher. It's still pretty strong, though. A couple of times, my laptop bag containing my MacBook Air and my 13-inch iPad Pro has been lying flat on the ground too far for me to reach to pick it up. I was able to grab the handle of the laptop bag, lift it up and rotate it onto its bottom, and then drag it over to where I could reach it standing at the walker. I certainly can't lift the backpack, but being able to move it that much when it's that heavy was pretty impressive. I put a picture of the grabber reacher tool in the show notes with a link to Amazon for a $15 version of this tool. This is not unique. You can find a ton of different ones in different colors with different grips and possibly lower prices. I plan on keeping this thing around for reaching under the couch to get things like Kepler's toys and maybe things that have fallen down behind the desk. Hey, wait a minute. I think I could use this to grab cables that have fallen down, couldn't I? I might buy more of these. Now, if you find yourself worrying about me, please send some of your mental energy towards Steve because he's doing yeoman's work here. He has to help me up and down the stairs every time I need to move. He has to do all of the cooking, all of the dishes, all of the dog walking, carrying every little thing from downstairs to upstairs and back and even across a room. I try to thank him every single time, and he's not showing any signs of wear just yet, but I do worry about him. I know this hasn't been the deepest tech story I've ever written, but I hope you'll bear with me over the coming weeks while I try to get my legs back under me, literally.
This must be the season of injuries, because you've all heard about Allison's horrible injury that she suffered recently. And while I'm not going to try to compete with that, I have an injury of my own that has forced me to look into alternative ways to use my Mac. Hi, my name is Scott Willsey, and I want to talk about Wispr Flow today. Wispr Flow is a voice-to-text AI program. It's dictation. Let's just say it that way, okay? It's dictation. Now, you're probably asking, okay, dictation, that's great. Don't Mac and iOS already come with dictation built in? And the answer is yes. Yes, they do. The problem with the Apple built-in dictation is the same problem that Siri has, that Apple AI has, Apple Intelligence, I should say. It's not very good. It does a lot of dumb things. It doesn't understand a lot of words that I say. It doesn't hear everything that I say unless I yell at the same volume for the entire sentence or paragraph. It is very comma and period happy. It divides my sentences up into sentence fragments that make no sense, or it puts commas where commas don't belong. I'm sure you've heard all the comma jokes, such as a comma can save a life, let's eat grandma, versus let's eat grandma. Or, back in the day, excessive use of commas was considered a very serious crime. It usually resulted in a long sentence. So yes, commas and where they're put in a sentence are important, and Apple Dictation just does not do it for me. So, what is my injury besides my obvious sense of humor? One day a few months ago, I was kind of running down the hall towards my office to log on to get onto a meeting, and I had a cup of coffee in one hand and a cup of water in the other. I couldn't see the floor because of that, and I tripped over something that was in the floor due to stuff being moved around my house. That's fine. I spilled my coffee. I was wiping it up, and somehow I destroyed the tendon at the distal end of my middle right hand finger. This resulted in a splint. It resulted in me typing weird, and eventually it resulted in surgery, and I'm still recovering from that right now. So I like to use a lot of dictation. I don't want to type an email. I don't want to type a message to my coworkers. I don't want to do all that stuff. I just want to say it. And I started relying on Apple Dictation. And again, just to reiterate what I've already said, not for me. And that's when I started looking to see, what do other people use for dictation on the Mac that they find effective? What do they recommend? And overwhelmingly, I found that a lot of people recommend Wispr. Wispr is at WISPRFLOW.ai. Wispr, WISPR, Wispr. Wispr has 3 plans. Flow Basic, which is free. You get 2,000 words per week on Mac or Windows, 1,000 words per week on Flow for iPhone. You get unlimited words per week on Android for a limited time only. So unlimited for a limited time. You get custom dictionary and snippets. You get support for 100 languages. You get privacy mode. You get HIPAA ready. And then if you want to go up a notch, you can get Flow Pro, which is for individuals and teams, which has everything that Flow Basic has, plus unlimited words per week on Mac, Windows, iPhone, and Android. You get prioritized support and feature requests. You get a command mode for editing. You get early access to new features. You get team collaboration features. Now, most of those I don't care about, but I do care about the unlimited words per week. Then there's Flow Enterprise for teams who need advanced security and support. So, for example, if you want enforced privacy mode, so no data retention, if you want enforced HIPAA compliance, if you want SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO 27001 compliance, which are just certifications that you'll know you need if you're in specific industries, you can get that with Flow Enterprise. The reason those type of certifications and the reason enforced privacy mode might be something you consider when you're looking at the plans is because this product uses cloud-based AI. That's why it's fast. That's why it's accurate. And so you want to make sure that you're not giving away anything you shouldn't if you have clients, if you have patients, so on and so forth. So what are the prices for these plans? Well, again, Flow Basic is free. Flow Pro, which is what I'm using, is $12 per user per month billed annually. And if you do the math, that's $144 per year. And I paid it because I'm using this for work situations. I personally, in my circumstance, I can write this off, which helps. It's still a cost, but I can write off the cost of it. And it's fast and accurate, much more than, again, comparing it to Apple Dictation, it's not even close. Flow Enterprise, the third plan, doesn't give a price. It just says, contact us, talk to sales. So this is where they want to know how big your team is, exactly what you're doing, and so on and so forth, so they can come up with a nice custom price, which probably benefits them greatly. Okay, now that we've got pricing out of the way and features mostly out of the way, let's talk about the app itself. What happens when you install Wispr? Basically, when you run it on the Mac, you see 2 or 3 things. One thing you see is up in the menu bar, there's a little Wispr icon, and that gives you some commands that I'll talk about later. Then there's the app window itself, which disappears from time to time, and sometimes it's kind of hard to bring it back, but most of the time you're not going to be interacting with that. And then there's the recording control itself. And this is what it looks like. Right in the middle of the bottom of the screen, there's a little tiny lozenge, very small. And if you hover over it, it becomes bigger. And you hover over it and it says, click or hold Command right arrow to start dictating. Now, in my case, I have a keyboard shortcut set up so that really all I do is I just hold the command key, the right command key. It's a keyboard shortcut. I don't have to click on that thing, although I can. But the nicest way to use it is just to set a key on the keyboard that you hold down and record that way. And it's going to use whatever your current mic is set to. So if my current mic is set to my MacBook Pro microphone, it'll use that. If my current mic is set to my studio display microphone, it'll use that. If my current mic is set to my podcast mic, it will use that. And that depends on the system input settings. You can have it launch the app at log on, you can have it show the flow bar at all times, and the flow bar is that little lozenge at the bottom. You can show the app in the dock if you want to, which I do have it do. And you can have it make dictation sound effects so that you know when it's done recording something. And you can mute music while dictating if you want to. You can auto add words to dictionary. So if a word is corrected, it will automatically add those to your dictionary so that it knows those words in the future. It automatically formats dictation with smart formatting if you want. And I do have that enabled, and it sometimes results in some interesting formatting. So basically, you create an account. You can add team members if you're on the middle plan like I am. I haven't added any. There's plans and billing section of settings, which lets you look at what plan you have. You can explore different features. You can manage your subscription. And then there's a data and privacy thing. Now, I have privacy mode enabled. So none of my dictation data, according to them, will be stored or used for model training by them or any third party. They claim zero data retention. Also, I have context awareness turned on so that it will use limited relevant text content from the app you're dictating in to spell names correctly and better understand you. But again, this is under data and privacy. And again, this is supposed to not be tracked in my case. Now you can delete history of all your activity, which will delete all your transcripts and associated data from the device that you do this on, like the Mac. And you can also enable the HIPAA mode if you want to, which I don't have enabled because I don't have that requirement in my job. But what about the rest of the app? What about the features? What is it like when you're using it? Well, normally the app itself is out of view. Like I said, there's a little tiny lozenge that you can hover over if you want to, or you can use your shortcut. Again, mine is set to use the right command key. So I hold down the right command key, and while I have it held down, I talk. And the little lozenge expands, and it shows a little indicator showing that it's hearing my voice. If I were to have the Mac app window open at this time, I would see what I just said appear in the window. But that's really not important because I never use it that way. What I do is I have my cursor active in some application on the Mac, some window, like I use Microsoft Teams for my job. I use BB Edit. I use browsers. I use, all kinds of software. So for anything that I want to dictate into, I'll just have the text box that I'm dictating into active. I'm not even looking at the Wispr app, and I can tell from the lozenge that it's picking up my voice, and then it puts whatever I dictated into whatever text box I have my cursor in. But again, if you want to, you can go to the app and you can see your past transcripts, and you can copy them from there if you want to. Then there's a dictionary tab on the app, which lets you, at any point, add a new word to the dictionary. It also lets you add a new word and call it correct a misspelling. So if it's coming up with something that you're saying and it's not spelling it the way you want, like let's say it's an industry term, or let's say it's a specific person's name, like I interact with a Jacob who has his name spelled with a K. He's from Iceland. He doesn't have a C, he has a K. So for him, I used add new to dictionary, and then I said correct a misspelling. I put in Jacob, and I corrected that to Jakob. And I don't interact with any other Jacobs, so that shouldn't be a problem. But you can do things like, I also have one time it recorded me saying Mac OS, and it put capital M, AC, space, capital O, capital S. So now I have a correction for that, so it'll put Mac OS the way Apple likes to say it, and things like that. I also see that it put MAC in all caps because I was writing something about MAC addresses, and it added that automatically to the dictionary. Let's see, it also put HTTPS in all caps in there automatically. It put a company name that I interact with in capitals. It put Sophos, as in the security company Sophos, in there automatically. It put Bash in there automatically, all lowercase, because it sees that I work in Bash a lot and I'm constantly talking about Bash. You can also have snippets. Like I have a scheduling page so clients can schedule me when they want to talk to me. So now there's a shortcut phrase that I can use to give the URL for that. There's also a style page where you can personalize your style for things like messages, work chats, emails, and other apps so that it sounds like you. Every word sounds like you. I haven't done that. I haven't customized my style yet, so I'm really not sure what it's like. And then there's a scratch pad where you can put notes. I don't know why I would want that. There's also some interesting stats here. I've been using this for 30 days. In that time, I've dictated 50,000 words, over 50,000, 50.2K, in fact. And I guess I've recorded at 163 words per minute. I don't really know what that means. I guess that's how fast I talk. I probably actually type. I would think I would type as fast as I talk, but I don't know. I guess it depends on how many times I hit backspace. All right, so again, in practice, usually what this app looks like for me is there's a little icon in the menu bar. I can go to the home page of the app, which is just the little home screen of the app. I can check for updates. I can paste the last transcript. If for some reason I was transcribing and I didn't realize that some text box on some app wasn't really active, because it's captured it, now I can just actually paste it into the app that I wanted to. I can look at the shortcuts. I can make sure that the microphone is the one that I want. I can look at the languages and I can choose what language I should be recording in, and I can quit. So that's about it from the menu. But again, there's the little lozenge down at the bottom of the screen that's always running. And there's my right command key, which is my shortcut. And when I hold that down, it records. So usually what it looks like for me is I'm in an app, I have a text box, I hold down my right command key, I talk, and then words appear. Now, one of the really cool things that I haven't talked about yet that is a feature of Wispr Flow is that Wispr Flow will make corrections. For example, if you're going along and you're saying, yeah, I went to the sound bar. I went to the drinking bar. It'll correct that. It'll not transcribe the first part. It'll only transcribe the corrected part. Or even if you sometimes say something as simple as, let's email Benjamin. It'll say, let's email Benjamin, and that's it. It won't do the rest of it. It knows that you're correcting what you're saying, and it will take that into account, which is very, very nice. I have found that very useful, and I'm surprised most of the time at how well that works. One of the things that I'm not so excited about is that in the inverse of the Apple dictation situation, where Apple dictation wants to use commas all the time, sometimes Wispr Flow will not put in commas where there really should be commas. Like if you start off the sentence with the word well, like for example, well, in this case, I would, it won't put a comma. It would say, well, in this case, I would. I'm sure some people write that way, but I don't. And it does, that's just one example, but there are cases where it does create run-on sentences. And then I am like, no, I want a period here and I want a comma there. And again, that's the opposite of what Apple dictation tends to do for me, where Apple dictation tends to give me sentence fragments, tends to put commas after every other word. Well, slight exaggeration there. See, there would have been commas there, but maybe not with Wispr Flow. I just don't know. Now, what about the iPhone? Because you're saying, wait a minute, I know how the iPhone works, and there's no way this app can actually always be running and always be dictating. You're right, except that this app has background activity. And here's what you do. You install the app on your iPhone. You give it keyboard permissions because it has a little keyboard app. So you guessed it, you're adding another keyboard to your input sources in iOS. So now when you go into an app and you tap into the text box, you've got your little globe at the bottom for your entire list of keyboards. You've got a Wispr Flow keyboard, and it'll tell you what language you have it set for. When you tap that, it opens the Wispr Flow keyboard. And the Wispr Flow keyboard is basically a bunch of numbers and symbols and no letters. But there is a button that says Start Flow. You hit the button that says Start Flow, it switches to the Wispr Flow app, and then sometimes you have to swipe back to the app that you were in to continue, or sometimes it will go back to the app by itself. It depends on the app. I don't know why. Once you have done that, then you tap the microphone on the Wispr keyboard again, and it starts listening. And when you're done, you tap the little check mark, and it puts everything in there that you've transcribed. And I will have a screenshot of me saying, then you type the microphone on the Wispr keyboard again, and it starts listening. When you're done, you tap the little check mark. Now, is this as convenient as having it always running on the Mac and just holding down a key? No. Is it sometimes a pain to switch between keyboards when you're using Wispr Flow and suddenly you want to correct some text and you want to do it by typing and you have to hold down the little globe and then select your English or other language keyboard? No, it's not that convenient. Is it convenient in the fact that once you turn on the Wispr Flow keyboard and you start a flow, as it's called, and then it switches back to your app, Is it convenient that it keeps the microphone on for a little while because it's background in the app? No, it's not the greatest. However, it is still much better than using Apple Dictation on the iPhone, in my opinion, for most cases. So for me, it's worth the $12 a month primarily for the Mac because, again, it's for my work. I can write it off, and therefore it becomes well worth it to me while my hand heals. Having it on the iPhone is a plus. It's a bonus. I would not pay $12 a month for it on the iPhone. I would do the free plan for it on the iPhone and get the limited amount of text, which would be fine. For me, the iPhone edition is really a big bonus. It is a nice bonus, but it is a bonus. I wouldn't pay for that alone. For me, it's primarily a Mac tool, and being able to easily edit the dictionary on the Mac, easily do all those things, that's what makes it worth it. So I do highly recommend Wispr Flow at wisprflow.ai for dictation on the Mac and on the iPhone, since it's not going to cost you any more regardless of which plan you choose. If you have dictation needs, if you're going to be dictating a lot, if you want accuracy, if you want speed, and you want convenience. If you're in a work situation where you can afford to have work pay for it, or you can afford to write it off, I think it's a no-brainer. Give your hands a break. Even if you don't go running around tearing tendons up while you're cleaning up coffee spills, you still might benefit from Wispr Flow. Thank you very much. I promise I will not be here all week. You can find me personally at scottwillsey.com. That's WILLS as in Sam, EY.com, or Friends with Brews. That's BREWS.com, which is a podcast I do with my friend Peter. We used to drink beer. Now we drink coffee or tea, and we talk about whatever interests us at the moment, which could be anything. Allison, I am hoping for a very successful and very speedy recovery for you. And yeah, wow, just please get better.
Allison jumping in here with a few quick comments about Scott's review. First of all, Scott, I feel so bad for your hand injury. I broke my right hand many years ago, and I remember making work pay for a dictation tool for me. I think it was Dragon Naturally Speaking. It was clumsy and difficult, but it was better than not being able to type at all. The tragedy of your injury is having to explain it to people. You really want an injury where you can start the story with, "Oh man, I was skiing down this hill so fast I nearly burst into flames." And instead, you have your story. Now to the audience. Scott was one of the early people to step up to help me with content while I'm on the injured reserve list. I was actually a little bummed when I found out he chose Wispr Flow because I was thinking about doing a review myself. But when I heard his review and read his content, I knew he did a far better job than I would have done on this. I also learned some things. Scott and I chatted back and forth a bit after he sent me his review, and we wanted to make a couple of clarifications. By default, the keystroke on the Mac is to hold down the function key or to double tap the function key so you don't have to hold the key down. He had actually remapped it to the right command key, but that tells you can do whatever you want. One thing he didn't mention in his review is that you can actually whisper to Wispr Flow. Now, that sounds kind of silly, but if you're in an environment where you don't want to be seen talking to your computer or your phone, it's a terrific way to dictate. Scott mentioned in his review that he says oops or sorry when he wants to correct a mistake he said. I tried strike that, and it seems to work most of the time. If I've flubbed up an entire sentence, I may say start over. I've had some success with those. Lately, I've been trying oops, and it seems to work better. One feature was working intermittently for me, and that's saying new line when I wanted a new paragraph. I wrote to support, and I was astonished at how quickly they responded to me. I kidded around with the support person that I thought she was just sitting at her desk waiting for me to write in a message. That's how quickly she answered. The documentation and the support person emphasized that in order to use a feature like new line, you have to give a pretty long pause after dictating. Otherwise, it thinks it's part of the sentence. I've had to learn patience to get this to work. I'm glad I had the problem, though, because it gave me the opportunity to chat with support, and the support was phenomenal. Scott expressed curiosity about the words per minute recorded by Wispr Flow. I suspect he doesn't type 163 words per minute because that is crazy fast. I mean, it's possible, as I haven't seen him type, but it's kind of unlikely. What I found out was that early on I was seeing very fast typing speeds, but it slowed down when I realized that one of the greatest things about Wispr Flow is you can pause and gather your thoughts before continuing to talk. With Apple's built-in dictation, you have to just keep talking as fast as you can or just stop transcribing. This ability to pause is what makes Wispr Flow more valuable to me for writing long-form content. With my leg injury, I'm finding that I'm in odd places instead of just sitting up at my desk, and it's often a little difficult to type. So I'm using Wispr Flow almost exclusively now for typing long and short form content. I don't find it terrible on the phone the way Scott described it, but it is much more tedious just because of the restrictions Apple puts on third-party keyboards. It's still worth it most of the time to switch to that keyboard, though. But on the Mac, man, I put it on both my Macs and I'm all over hitting double tap on that function button and I let it roll. One thing that's a little weird to get used to is Wispr Flow doesn't show you a transcription as you're talking. This is the opposite of the way built-in dictation works. This might seem disconcerting because you can't tell whether it's doing it right, but I find it makes me think more about what I'm saying and focus on what I'm trying to get across rather than micromanaging that it misspelled a single word or forgot a comma. Scott mentioned the small lozenge on screen on the Mac waiting for you to start dictating. If you find this lozenge is in your way, like I did and like Jill from the North Woods did, you can disable it by opening Wispr Flow settings and under General toggling off Show Flow Bar at all times. I also wanted to clarify that privacy mode is available to you even if you're on the individual $15 per month plan or $12 per month paid annually. You don't need the Teams plan to get that. If you go into Settings, Data and Privacy, there's a toggle that says Privacy Mode. And I think it's also included when you first onboard. It does expose that. This toggle is turned off by default if you didn't turn it on during onboarding, but it says, if enabled, none of your dictation data will be stored or used for model training by us or any third party. Zero data retention. I'm a little curious on that zero data retention because I can see on both of my Macs everything that I've dictated in the same app on the two different devices. So it's getting stored somewhere, but they're not using it for model training. Scott and I also wanted to make sure that you all got an affiliate link for Wispr Flow. The one I put in the show notes is purely out of the goodness of our hearts. If you use the affiliate link, you get a month free, and we don't get a darn thing other than your undying gratitude. I was curious how my metrics compared to Scott's because I'm just wild about using this tool. As of the time I wrote a response to Scott, I'd been using it only for about a week, and I had dictated 30,000 words. Now, I'm only averaging 115 words per minute, and I've used it in 42 apps, so I guess you could say I'm a fan. Thanks again to Scott for a terrific review, and boy, Scott, I really hope you do more reviews in the future. This was fantastic. Before I play this next piece, I want to set it up a little bit. You're going to hear me talking to magician Jonathan Molo while we were at CES. He calls himself the man in the purple suit. It works as audio, but you just might want to hit the link to go to the video to see the close-up magic he performs. Turns out he was working at the show to draw people in to talk to the Lockley folks at their booth, and it worked. Right after hearing Jonathan, you'll hear a terrific interview with them. Okay. I have no idea what's happening, but this gentleman came up to us in a purple tuxedo, and he said he wants to do a magic trick.
Yes,
and
thank
your name
you.
Is?
My name is Jonathan Molo, and I was asked to share a quick magic trick courtesy of Lockley. Well, are you ready, Allison?
I'm terrified.
Are you terrified? Don't be terrified, Allison.
You're giving him your wallet.
Oh, the wallet, I already have it, Allison. I like how she checked. Did you see that? You're like, wait a minute. So, Allison, I do need to borrow something special in order to make the magic happen.
Okay.
But in order to share something special, I need to borrow your ring. The more expensive, the funnier. Do you have a ring that I can borrow?
I have a sentimental ring and another one.
Whatever you
I'm really going to give you my ring.
Nobody ever trusts me. Nobody ever says yes. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Can I ask you?
I'm literally giving him a diamond ring.
Wow, thank you so much. Is that for insurance purposes? Is that what it is? Can we add a magical memory? What is the magical memory, first of all, to this ring? Why is it so special?
It was stolen by TWA Airlines and replaced by State Farm.
Well, I love it. That's such a magic.
It is. It's sentimental.
That's all. Can we add another magical memory to this? Is that okay?
Sure.
I want you to watch right here, Allison, just for you. There we go. This is my favorite part. This is where I need you to...
It's gone out of his hands.
Yes. But this is where you need to use your imagination. Attached to my finger is the ring. It actually flies through the air and lands right back on your finger. Go ahead and take a look, Allison. I'm not that good. That would have been amazing. You don't want to miss this, brother. This is crazy. Watch, nothing between my fingers, nothing on my sleeves, and in my back pocket, I carry my keys, and securely attached on my keys, Allison, is a ring. Not just any ring. Is that your beautiful ring?
My sentimental ring.
Sentimental.
It is.
Do it again. We're going to do it again because Steve's asked so nicely. Can we try that one more time?
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're going to hold out your hand just like this.
Okay.
Don't put it on quite yet. Now everybody knows what's going to happen. It's going to go right back here.
He's putting it in his back pocket.
Yes. And I'm going to take this from you right here. Right here.
Okay.
Do you remember
gone.
what's in my back pocket?
Yes, your keys.
Absolutely my
And
keys.
your hands never left your arms.
Never left. I have to use that. It has never left my arms. And attached to my...
It's not there.
That's a shame.
It's
Thank
not
you
on
so
your
much.
keys.
Do you have another ring we can... No, that's not right. You're very sweet. I have a gift for you. You're going to hold out your other hand right here.
Okay.
There's no money in there because
There's the wallet?
I'm a magician. Yes. In my wallet, in this zipper pocket, I have an envelope. A sealed envelope.
It is a sealed envelope.
That is for you.
Oh my gosh. It's a sealed envelope. I'm opening it here. And inside is my ring.
Yes. Thank you.
Look-
Make sure it's your ring.
Well, it's a unique ring.
It's
not a unique ring, so-
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
letting me borrow something so special.
All right, and for this, we get to talk to the Lockley people?
Yes, the Lockley people will help you here. I have my friend here that will help you right over here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I like smart locks and I like safes, and I saw both of them over here at the Lockley booth, so I'm talking to Frank Polidoro about what Lockley has to offer.
Okay. At Lockley, we're also known as what's called Pin Genie. We have a patent on what's called the Pin Genie hack-proof keypad. So if you look at our locks, you'll notice that the keypads look a little bit different, right? On here, you'll see those 4 circles, and within those circles, there's 3 numbers. Every time you wake the app to lock up, those numbers change. So it's impossible to copy that code.
Nobody can look at the fingerprint marks or whatever to see what you've done.
You can look at the fingerprint.
I have actually seen that type of technology on secure facilities working for the government.
Yeah.
So this is high security.
Exactly. And there's an older company that used to do that years ago called Hirsch that had a scramble-proof keypad for government. Okay.
That's probably who we saw
That's probably who you saw
a long time ago.
Yep.
So that's on a smart lock on a front door.
On a front door. So what we did is we've taken that technology, we migrated that over to the safe. So now we have that same type of technology on a safe. So somebody can't copy the code when they're entering the code into the safe. So now the safe has the ability to have the Pin Genie keypad to get into it. If not, you could have fingerprint capability to get into it. You could use an app to get into it as well. Okay. The other thing you could do too is you could do things like enter in a duress code. So you could have one normal code that opens the safe. The duress code would send a notification to someone's app.
So somebody's got you at gunpoint trying to open it?
Same thing with the fingerprint. I could open it with a normal fingerprint. If I use this other finger, that would be the duress code.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So
I'm thinking if they got a gun to my head, I'm giving them my stuff, though. But
could be. Yep.
Could see what that is.
And the
now, is this a fire safe?
This is not fire rated, but it is. We've rated it. It's a drop proof. We did drop testing with it, but there's no fire rating on this particular safe.
Okay.
We do make 2 versions of this. This is our larger size. We do make, and it's actually very popular, a smaller version, which is a good gun safe. And a lot of people mount those in cars. So that's another safe that we do have. Okay.
Now, what is this just flat plate sitting on styrofoam?
Well, this is it's our way of addressing app fatigue, right? Most people nowadays really are getting tired of having to download an app on their phone, right? Think about, especially if you're going to visit a building one time, right? You don't want to go to that building, download the app, create the account if I'm just going there once.
Right.
What we did here is we developed a app-free environment. So you just touch your phone to that plaque. And if this plaque was at the front of a multifamily building, what I would now do is I'd hit this open button. I go to where this is not connected up, obviously, but I would go to this area here that says communication. There would be a directory of everybody that was in the building. So if I was here to see Steven, I'd click on Steven. Steven and I would have 2-way communication through our phones. And then Steven would say, okay, Frank, you're right. I'll let you in. Hit the unlock button and the door unlocks.
But you just opened an app when you did that.
It wasn't an app. This is all done through a browser.
All right, so if I tap my phone.
Tap your phone.
I'm gonna tap. Do I need to unlock it first?
Unlock your phone.
Okay, so I'm going to unlock my phone. I'm going to tap it here.
Here you go.
And it says open.
Button.
And it says open.
Open.
And it says open.
There you go.
And it says open. 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 Video, there it goes. Gonna open. Okay, so is that a website? Am I in Safari?
It's
What am I in?
It's
No, that is, I don't know what it is, Steve. It looks like the Lockley logo, and
An app.
but it looks like an app, but I didn't.
but it's exactly, but it's not an app.
That's really interesting.
Web app, maybe.
Maybe.
It's more of a web app.
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah. It's probably a save to lock to home screen type app, but it made it automatically.
Yep.
Wow, that's really slick. So this would use for industrial use. I mean, you wouldn't have this on your house.
No. So the applications are multifamily, obviously, student housing,
Right.
assisted living, anywhere where there's multiple people living in a building.
Okay.
And we do have another version, smaller version, that would be used for Airbnb or VRBO. So here it is mounted next to the lock.
So it looks like a credit card,
Looks like
basically.
a credit card. So if I was coming to that Airbnb, when I got to that Airbnb,
Wait, I like doing it.
yeah, you do it.
All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tap here on this little credit card. It's the same
Nope,
thing.
but here, no, actually, this is going to be live. So you hit this com
Button,
Right.
and it goes through Cloudflare. Good. I like that. I'm going to verify I'm human.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a web app, but that's okay. Like to access the microphone.
Yep.
Oh, I'm going to say okay.
Yep. And the camera.
And the camera.
Okay.
And you're going to now
It's actually
it's
ringing on Cindy's phone.
so I've actually got my it's got video of me and audio. And Cindy's phone over there is lit up. I get the idea, but so she's going to say, okay, Allison,
she'll
you're here.
answer it. Now you guys will have two-way communication. She said, oh, yeah, I know who you are. And hit the unlock button, and that lets you in.
Okay.
And we're able to tie that to any one of our locks. So we could take any one of our locks and turn it basically into a video intercom.
That is fascinating.
Without the need of an app.
That is fascinating. I really like this. So if people wanted to go find out about the Lockley products, where would they go?
Go to Lockley.com.
So LOCKLY.com.
Correct.
Very good. Thank
Okay.
you so much,
Okay.
Frank. This is
Pleasure.
fantastic.
Okay.
Hi, this is Bruce from Tennessee with a summary of my experience working with Claude Code over the past several weeks. Claude Code from Anthropic is one of several AI tools that can be used to create software, as I'll discuss in this post. The show notes contain a link to an overview of Claude Code in Anthropic's documentation. The problem to be solved is I want a data processing and analysis pipeline to work with a large data product with thousands of files. In particular, I want to understand the potential errors, inconsistencies, and uncertainties in this data product, with the hope of helping to produce an improved version. I'm not going into the details of that work here, as I'm collaborating with a graduate student who needs to be able to publish their work for their degree. In this work, I'm using Claude Code to both help me improve my software development skills and develop this data pipeline. I'm doing this with the $17 a month Claude Pro subscription, which I also use for other things. Before diving into my experiences, let me clarify what Claude Code is and how it differs from other Claude products. Claude is one of the leading AI tools, published by Anthropic, as I mentioned. It can be thought of as three products: Claude Chat, Claude Code, and Claude Cowork. In fact, if you download the Claude desktop app for Mac OS or Windows, you'll see three tabs, one each for Chat, Code, and Cowork. Claude Chat is what most people are familiar with, particularly through the web interface at https://claude.ai. I have used Claude Cowork, but I'm not going to go into that here very much. It is a desktop tool that can be used to automate file and task management. As an example, I used it to extract text from about 40 different PDF files in a folder on my computer and give me that text in Markdown files in that same folder so that I could then do some other things with it. With Claude Chat, you ask questions and get answers. It's great for writing standalone scripts, explaining concepts, debugging specific snippets or problems, and generating code that you might paste into an editor or development environment. You can do a lot of that with Claude Code as well, but its primary use is as an agent. You describe what you want to build, and it writes code, modifies files, runs commands to test the code, and iterates until it thinks it's finished building what you asked for. It can build new projects, as well as help you understand and extend existing projects. It is designed for multi-file projects with complex dependencies and structures. It builds and runs tests like what Bart described in Programming by Stealth, episodes 33, 34, and 135, links in the show notes. You tell it the programming styles and conventions you use, like whether to use spaces or tabs, and it will make sure that that's done consistently across the entire project. As discussed in Anthropic's Claude Code overview documentation, link in the show notes, Claude Code can be used from the terminal, a Visual Studio Code extension, the desktop app, or a web interface. Given that the data pipeline I'm building will run on my computer, the web interface didn't make sense for me, and I didn't want to give Claude Code the kind of direct access to the GitHub repository it requires. My experience then is primarily using the terminal interface and the Visual Studio Code extension. I'm focusing here on building a new project, but I've used Claude Code to help me analyze other people's work. In those cases, I cloned the repository from GitHub, opened that in a directory in Visual Studio Code, started Claude Code using the extension, and had Claude analyze the code in that project and give me a summary of what it found. Then I started asking questions. Claude was really useful helping me understand how those software packages did what they did. That was particularly true for a project where the documentation was rather sparse. While I have made my living as a software developer in ages past, I haven't done this scale of work in 2 decades, and I've never done it in Python, which is a really good language for data science in this kind of project. While I've followed a lot of the evolution in software development over the decades, and I've managed dozens of software developers, that's different than actually putting these practices into practice. With Claude Code, I have a tool that's helping me understand how those practices are applied, as well as a tool that's helping me build what I want. It's even helping me learn how to more effectively use Claude Code itself. I have 4 key observations after several weeks of use. 1, time efficiency. Tasks that would take me days to weeks now take hours. But this is AI-assisted development. I'm still driving the process. 2, quality improvement. Because iteration is easier, I often don't stop at the first working solution. I can explore alternative, ask about trade-offs, and refine the implementation. The end result is better than I'd produce alone, and better than Claude Code produced on its first pass. In addition, writing and running tests is tedious. Using Claude Code for this means I have much better testing than I would have bothered with if I was writing things by hand. Number 3, active learning. I ask extensive questions and challenge Claude's answers. This questioning process is teaching me how to effectively apply modern best practices and improving my Python understanding. 4, mixed capability. Claude can produce brilliant solutions and make baffling mistakes. So I review everything carefully. Come to think of it, at least some of that's true about me too, at least the baffling mistakes part. With that summary up front, let me dive into some details. There are multiple ways to install Claude Code. I chose to use Homebrew with brew install Claude-code. I then launch it from my terminal window by going to the directory from the project I want to work on and typing Claude. This gives me a prompt where I type my questions and requests in natural language. Claude uses the code base and the claude.md file as context. More on that in a minute. And either answers my questions or plans and executes its response to my request. I see answers and reasoning in the terminal window. I also get prompts asking permission for Claude to modify files and run specific commands, as well as questions that Claude needs answers for as it discovers things it hadn't asked about before. When I started using Claude Code, the other installation path required installing Node.js and was a bit more complex. In the weeks to months since, they've released a cleaner native installer which auto-updates. With Homebrew, I need to run brew upgrade often, as Claude Code is updated multiple times a week. I may well uninstall the homebrew version and switch to that native installer. The Visual Studio Code extension provides an alternative interface, but the same capabilities. In this case, Claude Code is a tab in Visual Studio Code. One really cool feature is that I can highlight a section of code in another tab and ask Claude to, quote, explain this, or, quote, why did you choose this approach? I mentioned the Claude Markdown file, which Claude Chat and Claude Cowork do not use. This is a Markdown file that Claude Code reads every time you start a Claude Code chat. You can think of it as a long prompt that Claude Code gets automatically run at the start of a chat to guide Claude's response and actions. The most common place for a Claude.md file is in the root folder for a project. This is a project-specific use, and this Claude.md file contains information about the project and instructions for Claude Code to follow. If this was a multi-developer project, we would all be sharing the same project-specific Claude.markdown file. For my project, the Claude.md file specifies the overall project goals, the version of Python I'm using, that I want to follow the PEP 8 Python style guidelines, and how tests should be constructed with PyTest and the process I want to follow for merging code. It also describes the main data sources and the file structure for the project. This is all context that helps keep Claude Code on the track I want it to be on and ensures consistency in development style and practices. Again, this is something that I co-wrote with Claude Code. You can also have a Claude.md file in your user home directory, which is a developer-specific set of instructions and preferences. I have not gone down that path yet, but I could, for example, specify what I want for the level of detail and explanations and my preferences for editors, linters, and package managers. Where the two files conflict, Claude Code is at least supposed to use what's in the project-specific file. There are lots of articles and videos about the Claude.md file, and I particularly like the article from builder.io, again, link in the show notes. Claude has multiple plans, which give you different sessions and weekly quotas. A session starts when I ask any of the Claude tools, Code, Cowork, or Chat, to do something, and I don't already have an active session. For Claude Pro in March 2026, the session runs for the next 5 hours. Session quotas and lengths vary by plan and will likely change in the future. At the end of that 5 hours, my session quota resets and I can start a new session. I've absolutely hit those session limits, particularly when I'm working on more complex requests. When that happens, I can wait until the session ends or pay for extra usage. Most of the time, I just wait since I'm not on a deadline. This session and its limits are across all of the Claude products, Chat, Code, and Cowork. I've run into this same session quota just using Claude Chat when I was asking a lot of complex questions. As for the weekly limit, all I can say is I've never come close to hitting it. There are tools to help you monitor your Claude usage. I selected an open source tool called Claude Usage Tracker based on its GitHub stars and activity, link in the show notes. This gives me a menu bar widget showing where I am on the current session quota, as well as the amount of time until the session resets. There are multiple ways to monitor this within Claude Code, Claude Desktop App, and the Claude.ai web interface, but the menu bar widget is simple and does all I need. Now let me walk through how I use Claude Code to define and develop something I need my data pipeline to do. To start, I wrote a GitHub issue describing what I wanted. I asked Claude to review what I wrote and identify questions about implementation. It asked about error handling, edge cases, and integration points I hadn't considered. I answered those questions and had it rewrite the issue, incorporating my answers. Reading that revised description helped me see additional requirements and a few mistakes in Claude's understanding. I edited the issue to address those. I asked Claude to review again. It asked more questions, another round of updates. After 3 rounds, The issue description was substantially more complete than my initial version. This iterative process, where Claude asks questions that force me to think through details, produces better specifications than I'd write alone. The next step is where the agentic part of Claude Code really comes into play. Once I was happy with the GitHub issue describing what I wanted, I simply gave Claude Code the instruction to, quote, implement the feature in issue number 6. It went off and thought for a bit, made some changes to about 15 files to implement that feature, including creating a bunch of unit tests and some integration tests. It then ran those tests, diagnosed the failures, and then updated the code so that the tests pass. Because of the iteration on the specification, what Claude Code wrote was really, really close to what I wanted and only required minor edits on my part. While I could ask Claude Code to stage and commit the changes, I'm not doing that in this project. If you're not familiar with Git workflows, a file that's been changed is called unstaged. You tell Git to stage a file through the git add command, which tells Git that this file is part of the next batch of changes you want to commit to the repository. For each modified file, I read through the changes. If something's unclear or maybe wrong, I ask Claude to explain. I might ask Claude to fix a problem, or I might fix it manually. Once I understand and agree with all of the changes in a file, I stage that file and move on to the next one. Once I've reviewed everything, then I work with Claude to write the commit message and commit the changed files into the repository. This review process serves two purposes: quality control and learning. I'm verifying the code is probably doing what I want while absorbing patterns and techniques I can apply later. One of the questions I ask Claude Code quite often is, what are different approaches for achieving this outcome, and what are the trade-offs? Claude will present multiple implementation options, maybe a simple approach that works but scales poorly, a complex approach that handles edge cases, and a middle ground. It explains performance implications, maintainability concerns, and dependencies for each. This changes how I work. Instead of implementing the first solution I think of, I explore the design space. I make informed decisions about trade-offs rather than discovering problems later, and I don't rely on just Claude Code for that decision. I'll often follow up on the links that I ask it for about the trade-offs, do my own internet searches, or even ask a different AI the same question. There are extensive tutorials available for working with Claude Code. I do recommend the Claude Code tutorials on YouTube by NetNinja and by Leon Van Ziel. Links again in the show notes. I have also found Anthropic's official documentation, link in the show notes, to be quite useful. Also, ask Claude Code itself. Claude Code has functionality specifically designed to teach you better ways to use Claude Code itself. There's a lot more I could say, but this article is already longer than I was targeting. Claude Code is one option among several AI development tools. I chose it because Anthropic appears focused on privacy, and it is one of the leaders for its kind of use. I was also already using Claude Chat extensively, and I have that paid Claude Pro plan. The fact that my father's name is Claude doesn't hurt either. Is it the best tool? Today? Maybe, maybe not. Next month? Maybe, maybe not. The AI development space moves quickly. It's a good tool, and I think it's likely to remain among the leaders, which is good enough for me. What I can confirm, I'm accomplishing in hours what would otherwise take days, if not weeks. I'm learning modern development practices while building real software. And I'm producing higher quality results because the tool makes iteration tractable. Claude Code makes mistakes. I catch at least some of them during code review. It also produces insights I would have missed. It's a partnership, not autopilot. If you're a developer, whether experienced and returning after years away or newer to the field, I recommend exploring AI-assisted development. The specific tool matters less than learning to work effectively with these capabilities. Thanks, and may you find beauty in the world around you.
Thanks so much for that, Bruce. I'm loving learning all the different ways people are using AI, and I like the way you explain this without us needing to be programmers. I also like how you explained the different types of Claude, because I was getting kind of tangled on that before you explained it. I'm trying to get my nerve up to see whether Claude Code could help me make my elapsed time adder into an iOS app. I would love to have it on iOS, but I just haven't gotten around to trying that. Maybe while I'm laid up, I'll give it a try. Last week during the live show, Kevin, also known as Big in Virginia, was being snarky. That's not at all unusual. In fact, I probably wouldn't recognize him if he wasn't giving me a hard time. But then he got John, also known as NASA Nut, going along with him. Imagine my surprise when after the live show, they both went to podfee.com/donate and each of them bought me a coffee. I made $10 just for letting them act like children. I hope they act up more often. If you'd like to be snarky to me, be sure to donate to support the show when you do by going to podfee.com/donate. Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 831 for March 18th, 2026, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. This week, our guest is the scintillating conversationalist, Adam Engst.
Always, I have to go for new adjectives every time.
Well, I actually stole this one from the article that you wrote that we're going to be discussing today. I thought
that's right.
It might tickle
That's my
you.
goal in life,
Yes.
to be a scintillating conversationalist.
There you go. So your article is entitled Reading Doesn't Fill a Database. It Trains Your Internal LLM. And I love everything about this article because it's such a weird way to think about life, but also I resonate with everything you said in it. So I think I'm going to be going, yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Yes, precisely. Oh, yeah.
Well, we enjoy discussing things when we don't agree. It's also fun when we agree. But why don't you give us the setup for where you got this idea?
Well, so my son Tristan is a PhD student at Simon Fraser University working in machine learning. And at some point, children believe their parents know everything when they're little, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, then at
Sure.
some point they become teenagers and believe their parents know nothing.
But when they get over that hump,
When they get back over that hump, Tristan sort of went through that phase a little weirdly. And so he's intellectually aware of the fact that we have no idea what he's doing. I mean, like, what he's doing requires graduate, level math. I mean, he is doing super high-end stuff that, again, self-supervised learning, blah, 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 breaking images into pixels and neural networks, 14-hour jobs on the Canadian cluster, blah, blah.
and this is the subject that's the most advanced right now from a mathematics standpoint, in computer science
So,
anyway.
love him dearly, want to be supportive, but man, do I not know what he is really talking about. And so I said, he knows intellectually that it is, but when we chat with him, I sometimes am looking for ways to bring the conversation back to what I understand. And sort of general AI is a useful conversational topic because he's doing very, very high end stuff in one super specific world, but he also is obviously fully aware of what's going on elsewhere and has opinions about that are informed by being a PhD student in machine learning. And so we're doing this, and I'm sitting at lunch, eating lunch while I'm chatting with him. And normally when I'm eating lunch, I'd be reading a magazine, something like that, just because it's what I do. I'm a word person. I read basically at all times, just how I am. And so I wasn't reading because I was talking to him, and I was sort of kind of thinking like, oh, I'm not reading a magazine. I wonder. And then I just had this weird thought popped into my head of like, wait a minute, why do I read these magazines anyway? I mean, I'm not doing it professionally. Actually reading professionally kind of makes me tired. Like I just got David Pogue's, 3-inch thick Apple at 50 book, which very entertaining. Lots of good stories and things like that. But oh man, it's so hard to read about Apple when I'm done for the day.
Oh.
that I read about Apple all day. So it's this question of like, why am I reading this stuff? Like, I don't, I'm reading a New Yorker, an article, I think it was actually about Gavin Newsom, governor of California, and his political history and possible future. Do I care about Gavin Newsom? Not particularly. Don't live in California, maybe he'll be a political candidate who I could vote for in the future. Maybe he won't. Who knows? So, knowing more about Gavin Newsom, not terribly important for me.
But it's not like on your list of, I need to read up on all people who might
Nope.
potentially be candidates. Just reading
Nope.
it.
And I'm actually very much in the opposite camp of like, I don't want to even know their names unless they're going to be candidates.
Okay.
Right? Like, do not clutter my brain with some person who, someone thought could be a presidential candidate in 4 years, but they're not. It's like,
Right.
That's just
And
not
yet here
interesting
you
to me.
are reading about Gavin Newsom.
Precisely. So why am I doing this? And that was when I sort of stumbled upon this, like, I don't need to know this in any way, shape, or form, but it's sort of tweaking what I know about the world, right? It's adjusting my view of the world. I mean, I have some of my closest personal friends live in California, so I have family in California, and so like, okay, this could be something I could talk about with them. So it's something that it is a topic that could filter into dinner party conversation kind of things.
And you're
But
only
am I
using
gonna
this as
remember
an
this?
example, right? This isn't, you read a lot of political stuff for reasons like this.
I
This is
don't.
just a random
I-
example.
Just a random article. It was literally the article that was open on the table in front of me while I was talking to Tristan instead of reading. and so what I kind of realized is I've always had this belief that reading was in essence a database action, that I was adding stuff to my database.
Okay. Like just a
And-
list of knowledge.
Right. I mean, like, oh, I read that article. It's in my database, and I can pull it out later. Like, that's sort of the implicit assumption with a database is that you can retrieve it. A database that you can't retrieve stuff is useless, right?
Right.
But of course, the reality is I don't remember hardly a thing from that article. I'm lucky that I remember it was about Gavin Newsom. But even as we speak, however, little bits more kind of filtering into my brain. But could I actually tell you much about Gavin Newsom? No, that's not really the point. And so because I'm sitting there talking to Tristan about large language models and all that, I'm like, what I'm doing is adjusting my weights. Like, just
Explain what weights
basically-
are.
Yeah. So the way that large language models are trained is that they ingest a vast amount of data, and then what they're doing. I'm actually going to make sure I get this right because I don't want to say it wrong.
Because Tristan will find out.
Oh, believe me. So what they're doing is they take a lot of data and then they're asked to predict what word comes next in a known sequence. And so basically the system is saying if the cat jumped over the hat, and that is the text in the thing, and then the system will say the cat jumped over and the neural network has to say hat. And if it's wrong, basically it doesn't match that training data, it adjusts its internal weights, which are those kind of the numeric values that map links and concepts, the links between the concepts. It just nudges those to say, the cat jumped over the dog. Oh, nope, that was wrong. So don't do dog next time. The cat jumped over the fish. Nope, don't do fish. And so it keeps adjusting these variables, these weights until it gets to hat.
Huh. Okay.
And then it's like, okay, hat is the right answer. I've adjusted the weights at that, and now when I say, the cat jumped over and it's gonna complete with hat most of the time. That's, again, it's not deterministic. It's not 100%. But it is,
maybe look
more
for other
likely-
context, but it's probably
Right.
going to be had.
Right, precisely.
Okay.
And so basically, so now, thinking about it that way, reading an article is basically adjusting those weights. So, like, I knew who Gavin Newsom was. I knew he was governor of California. I knew he was a national political figure as well, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't, it's not something completely unknown in my training data. It was like I had all of that information. But adding all that other stuff in actually did tweak things a little bit for me in terms of like
the way you
how I think
about.
of it.
Okay.
Right. And so there was an actually, again, this is all kind of flooding back. There was a point in the article sort of comparing him with Zoran Mandami, the new mayor of New York City, who's very much kind of the young kind of new face of the Democratic Party, or new approach of the Democratic Party, whereas Newsom is well known and popular and everything like that, but much more of an older approach of how the Democratic Party thinks about the world. And I'm like, oh, that's in it. I hadn't thought about that as this dichotomy. And so that was again that trigger of, oh, all I've been doing is nudging. When I think of Gavin Newsom, I now think of him a little bit more as this, person who embodies a classic Democratic Party approach to governing, which it may not be. I'm not applying values to it. Just that he's more like this. Mandami's like that. I've set them apart now.
Okay.
In my head,
I do want to maybe start veering away from politics, because this isn't what this is about. But if you had been,
it was terrible. This was the example, but
yeah. But I mean, if you had been reading about old growth tree forests, and then you read a new article, or an article that shed some light on the way the roots work, and that would be adding to that training database. That now you've got a little bit deeper understanding and more
precisely
context
those
to come out with it.
The Wood Wide Web, for instance. You've heard about the Wood Wide Web?
I have not.
You have not heard about the Wood Wide Web?
I'm not.
So
shocked
no.
it
Basically,
exists.
trees communicate through mycorrhizal fungal networks.
Now I have heard about that.
Yeah, that's where the term the Wood Wide Web comes from, because trees are communicating within a forest.
Well, I just read something about the largest single tree element. There's like a tree that's this massive. It's like the size of Connecticut or something. I don't know. I'm making that part up.
A little, not quite that big, but yes. Like there's various things that go along these ways. Like I think there's aspens. But in any event, this is exactly the point, that like we can talk about this, but we are not pulling information out of a database,
right?
Which is why it's so fuzzy and probably wrong, right? We are in essence hallucinating.
We've had Dr. Marianne Gary, who studies memory, excuse me, on the podcast quite a few times, and one of the things she talks about is that when you take a memory out and you think about it, even if you don't even talk about it, if you take it out, think about it, and put it back, you've now changed that memory. So the fact that we just did this, you probably are going to tell somebody later that single tree is the size of Connecticut because it got in there somehow.
You've got in my head.
Well, and that is an interesting piece. If you read stuff that's garbage, that can also get in there. And one of the examples I wanted to give is, I'm a big fan of the 1Password podcast, which sounds really boring, but it's actually hilarious. It's very, very interesting. But one of the things they do is they play a silly password game, or security-related game, I should say. And one of their games for several months was they would tell a very in-depth, detailed security story that may be true or false. And it would go on for like 5 or 6 minutes before the other host had to guess, was it true or false? All of those are in my brain now, right? Those, all of the false ones. And actually somebody finally said that to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, I guess that was dumb. So now I think all these things happened that never did.
Yeah. No, it's really true. And part of, there was sort of this question of like, well, why does this matter? And, because, we're not a database, we're not a large language model, all of these things are simplifications of how we see the brain, because we don't actually understand the brain all that well. I'm sure your doctor friend actually understands it way better than the rest of us, but certainly in general, we're still figuring a lot of this stuff out. And so we're often just looking for models for how to explain it. So back in the day, people would talk about, telephone switchboards or filing cabinets, like, oh, well, I'll file that away in my memory, literally thinking in terms of the filing cabinet analogy. And so the database, was sort of what comes along in probably the 80s or 90s as, computers remember a lot of stuff. Maybe that's how brains work too. If you're just trying to come up with an analogy. And what I was running into with this is, I think in many ways these LLMs are the new analogy, which is a little ironic because, of course, they're neural networks. They were at least inspired by how we think neurons work in the brain.
Yeah. So maybe it makes perfect sense that what we're doing is exactly what they're doing, or could be.
I mean, could be. I don't know. But what I also, again, like, with the whole memory being thing, what I liked about it was also is it somewhat gave me permission to not stress about remembering. Right? That you read something, you're like, oh, that's a great art. That was such a really interesting thing to say. I should remember that. Does it happen? No, of course it doesn't happen. You're right. Our brains are full. There's no way to store everything. And
what, though? The problem is some people can, and that's what drives me crazy. I mean,
there are other people who have the photographic memories, but I understand they're usually very, very unhappy.
No, but I mean, I have a friend who can tell you the name of every teacher she ever had. She can tell you what grade it was. What grade did she learn, a certain subject? And it's like, I can remember 2 of them and maybe what city I was living in at the time. And I'm out after that. I have no idea what grade I was in when I learned, that there were however many states at the time. Probably 36, I'm so old. But anyway.
I mean, obviously memory is definitely one of those things, which is people remember things in very different ways. And, we talked a little bit about, aphantasia and whatnot. Like Tanya is much better. My wife is much better at remembering like people and like situations, like how she felt, that kind of thing. Like, I don't remember how I felt ever. Like, I don't remember emotions.
Explain what aphantasia is again. I thought that was the face blindness thing.
Aphantasia is not being able to visualize things in your quote unquote mind's eye.
Right. And if I close my eyes, I can't see people or things.
Right. And I think that's related. I think it's related to more things. I mean, I think it's I don't want to say I think it's connected to other ways of thinking about the world. So, when some big article about aphantasia, they were talking to a physicist, I think it was, and he discovers that he has no idea that other people can do this and he can't. He discovers it, and at first he's really put out because other people can visualize things and I can't. I'm clearly defective in some way.
Yeah.
But of course he steps back and well, wait a second. But I'm a respected physicist and I do good work and no one has ever kind of implied that I'm incapable of doing things. So clearly this isn't a problem. And then the other side of that, again, reading from an article, is hyperphantasia, where basically, your mind's eye is an IMAX film at all times.
That might be annoying.
And it's apparently really annoying. And those people actually have a little bit of trouble acting in the real world because their internal world is so rich and detailed that, you want to
visually
talk about daydreaming.
loud.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can close your eyes and have an IMAX film, whereas I close my eyes and I see little kind of lighty things, maybe if I'm lucky.
Sparkles.
Yeah, right. So again, it's a lot of how the brain works and having these discussions or having people kind of come up with these analogies or these realizations, I think is useful because it sort of gives you, for me anyway, it gave me permission to not worry about remembering something. That by merely reading this, I'm adjusting those weights about how I think about the world. And now that I'm of course I think whenever I'm going to talk about trees being connected by fungal networks, now I'm going to be thinking about Connecticut. So So it's like it's not.
Let's keep
it's not always
reinforcing this
correct.
so we're sure it's there.
Oh yeah, everyone's going to be thinking Connecticut from now on.
Oh yeah, not just you. We just did it to everybody.
Oh yeah, this is seriously problematic. But also like it helps, and this is one of my complaints about how people have been criticizing LLMs. They hallucinate, they make stuff up. I'm like, yeah, like people don't. I mean, either from intentional or no. I mean, we make stuff up literally all the time that's not correct.
And I would suggest certain people, I mean, obviously you and I would never be that way, but when they're wrong, they're equally adamant that they're right, which is what is so dangerous about the LLMs.
Well, and I mean, there's the famous, I can't remember I think the Stanford psychology professor who did the experiments. He would show people a film of a car accident, of a red car running into a blue car or something. I forget which ones were actually at fault. But it was very clear which car was at fault. And so they show the participants in the study the film, and then later they say which car was at fault, the red car or the blue car, and people pretty much always get it right at that point. And then what they say is which car was at fault, the gray car or the blue car. And people know it's not the blue car, so they say the gray car. And then the follow-up question is, or basically, then they ask, basically, they tell the person that, oh no, it was the red, the car was red in the film, and people will, because they have said that the car was gray, they will die on that hill of the car was gray.
This is, believe it or not, one of the exact examples that Dr. Marianne Gary talked about on the show.
Famous experiment,
and
yeah.
So her work is creating false memories. And, there was a phase where people would go like through hypnosis to find these repressed memories. And her work, and under Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who did the primary research on this, proved that they can induce memories in people. This is the example of it, was where they just taught them it was a gray car, and it can be a really dangerous tool to use.
Yeah.
In this, they're just messing with grad students when they do this. So
I actually have a distant family story surrounding this. I had a great aunt, passed away long ago, whose husband wanted to get rid of her, and so. This is long enough ago that you couldn't just, sort of get a divorce and whatnot. It was troublesome that way. So he decided he was going to have her committed to a mental institution.
Mm.
And so what he would do is he would say things like, oh, could you get my wallet from the dresser? And she would go up there and there would be no wallet on the dresser. And then he would basically go back, sort of sneak back and put it there. And then it's like, why didn't you get my wallet from the dresser? It was right there on the dresser. And so basically he had her completely,
convinced,
unsure about what reality was until he managed to get her committed. At which point my grandfather, her brother, who was not a man to be messed with, went to the place and checked her out and told them under no uncertain terms that was the way life was going to be and they should get over themselves. And then he went and told the husband that too, and got the divorce. And my great aunt lived happily ever after by herself. So
that's awful. That's awful.
But so you really could mess with people because brains are mushy.
Now, you said in your article, you talked about how building these weightings is different when you're children because you've got less information that you're trained on.
Yes.
And when I read that, and I'm sure you're right, is my brother used to purposely lie to me, tell me things that were not true, just for sport. And so I have this
sounds like a brother,
a big database or LLM that is slanted towards these things that are false. I even remember him telling me one time, he says, the only thing I'll never lie to you is whether you have a horsefly on your head. Because we swam in lakes in Michigan and often you get horseflies and a horsefly bite is very painful. And so as soon as you tell somebody that, they go underwater to get the horsefly off. And many years later, I think we were full on adults. He goes, yeah, I was lying about that to you too.
Oh, man.
So I know all these things that I still quote to this day, and the whole time I'm going, man, I think Kelly told me that.
Yeah, No, it's absolutely the case, and so certainly when you're a kid, basically the weights are much stronger. In the sense of like they move things more because there's less data to adjust. You don't know as much,
I wonder if they
and
stay
so
stronger.
well,
Does it
that's
take
just
more
it.
to
Is that,
chip
and I
away
think
at them?
and everything becomes more nuanced, as you add to your training data, and you realize that, I can't believe everything my brother tells me, and
It's
so
still in
that's
there.
yeah, right.
Maybe the weight's a little
Um,
lower, but it's still there.
and so I think sort of when you're a kid, you have to you take things much more on face value because you don't have all of these other bits of data which have been nudging those weights back and forth over time. And so that's why as an adult, particularly an older adult, people get pretty fixed in their opinions because any new information is nudging against a whole lot of learned experience. So even if it's something that says, well, you were wrong all this time, well,
That was
takes
a
a
little
while for
harsh to
that
nudge.
that information to kind of be nudging it back in. And that
Now, I've
you
been
see
kidding around
people
about my brother who was he was harmless, he was just mean, but what about somebody who tells you all the time you're growing up that you're fat, that you're stupid, that you're not like other kids, you're wrong in who you are? Those weights are probably really, really hard to that would account
yeah,
for how hard it is to erase that and get to
yeah.
where you're going, "Wait a minute, I'm not fat, I'm not ugly, I'm not stupid," you know? Why did I believe that for so long? Did to change that weighting factor takes a very long time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you certainly, I mean, but it's not that it also can't happen, but there are the people who, have literal life-changing experiences and, flip-flop. They become born again because they had a revelation and you're like, okay, like
Or switch
that's you
political
did and
parties or
switch right. You
whatever.
know,
Yeah.
well, so there's the life-changing experience. There's also, the switch political parties is often a little bit more of, repetition. So that I mean, all these weights can be nudged, and if you are, say, listening to NPR or Fox News all day long, which people do,
Right.
then you can nudge those weights in the other direction pretty heavily, because it's just happening over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna talk about it because 'cause it'll get political.
Yeah, I know, sorry.
No, 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 I threw that one in there. Yeah, it makes me think about whether you can truly shift it or when you stop doing something, does it shift back? Here's a question I'd like to know from maybe Tristan can answer is in our brains, the weighting factor of my brother told me I was stupid or ugly, for many, many years. He didn't s well, yeah, I actually did say that, but, anyway, let's take that as an example. Those weighting factors have to be outweighed by a whole lot of more data points to weight to make me go, "Hey, wait a minute, I've got a degree in advanced degrees in engineering, maybe I'm not stupid." But it took a long time to change that. With an LLM, do all the weightings get recalculated? Like, do the wrong ones get added to the training? Unadded, that's a good word. You know what I mean?
Well, so in theory, the LLM is, um yeah, this is probably a little bit more. I mean, I'm gonna be careful because I don't actually know how I'm ta how what how this is done sufficiently because there's multiple ways to adjust the weights and then the data that is used. There's various ways with LLMs to say you've trained on this set of data, and now we're gonna fine tune on this smaller set of data. And the idea of doing that is that you can, that would be more like, saying, "I am starting this new job, and I need to understand this particular topic really well, so I'm just gonna sit down and read about it, talk to people about it, just immerse myself in it and thus learn a great deal about a new topic. That's more like fine tuning in the LLM world rather than adjusting your weights. Your weights are usually pretty well set early on in the training data.
So
And
then
there's
more
also
like us.
yeah, precisely. And so the sort of in the later in life thing, if you want to change stuff in a big way, you have to put quite a lot of effort in.
Yeah, I think what I like most about what you've described here is going to reinforce something everybody already knows, but a lot of us don't do, which
like
is
all good psychological research. You're like,
Yes.
oh, yeah, everyone knows that, don't they?
Yes, exactly. But it's that reading a wide variety of things like you do, where you're reading random articles out of the blue. I just read a research paper on some results of a real trial that stopped type 1 diabetes. 10 of 12 people in this study, they don't have
Yes.
diabetes. They are no longer insulin dependent after 4 weeks of an islet.
Was that the GLP-1 stuff?
No, it was an islet transplant is what it's called, which I
Oh,
don't know what that means.
okay.
But anyway, it just came out 2 days ago. But anyway, what was I reading that for? I don't have diabetes. Nobody in my family has type 1 diabetes. I do have one friend who has it, but just, wow, that's really interesting. Reading things that are outside of what you know makes you a more
Yeah.
well-rounded person, but it's also changing those weighting factors that you're starting to know, like what's possible, and makes me a scintillating conversationalist as well.
That's right. And I was going to say, I'll bet those are the islets of Langerhans.
What's that?
I have no idea, but that's the words that come up in my head when I hear islets.
Those were the next words.
Pretty much. No, it's seriously.
The cat in the hat.
Now True.
Now he's gonna look
Let
it
me
up to
see.
try to figure out what it
I
was.
kind of
So maybe his retrieval
I-
system is needs a little bit of help here. Not really
yeah,
sure.
the islets are clusters of pancreatic cells discovered by Dr. Paul Langerhans. See? I'm
Well,
making this up.
it might
in the
be.
pancreas.
I don't know. What you said
It's
before
probably
that
what they're
about
transplanting.
all good studies reinforce what we already know. I just read one. Actually, it was from Cornell. I read this today that they studied people who use jargon like let's circle back and let's use all the corporate speak jargon. The people who are really good at that are actually terrible at their jobs.
Yes.
And they studied
Again.
1,000 people to come up with that.
Well, it's nice to know that someone has proven what we, again, have already known. Anyone who talks
Exactly.
like that is clearly making it up.
But what was I reading that
but-
for?
But yeah, no, and it is interesting because, like, I did have this, I was joking about this, like the goal was to become a better cocktail party conversationalist. Not like I go to cocktail parties even, but it feels to me like there are, like, it used to be that being well-read what meant that you could, like, quote Shakespeare or recite poetry from memory. And that's a little bit more of that database, right? Like, you could actually pull out Shakespeare. I knew a
Right.
classics professor who was the terror of grad students because they would say something in a presentation they were giving. And he was like, well, Herodotus says, and then he would go into the Greek, like actually saying it. And you could these poor grad students, they were like deer in the headlights. I mean, they had no clue.
But nobody
because-
wants to be near that person at the cocktail party. I think it gets back to my mother. Her greatest compliment to my father was that she always described him as someone who was always curious. He was curious
Yeah.
about everything. He would read
Yeah.
anything. He would watch any documentary. He wanted to learn at all times. And I think that describes what you are. And I am maybe to a 5% degree in that category. I tend to lean towards reading tech, but I still like the other stuff. In fact, you talked about in your article about reading physical newspapers and physical magazines. And
Yeah.
one thing I miss from reading newspapers, I used to read the Wall Street Journal, is that I would read the front page, and the bottom half of the front page always had an article about some completely random topic that didn't have anything to do with anything. I remember reading an article about a guy who was a sailboat captain but he was blind, and he had this huge backpack filled with a computer, because cell phones didn't exist back then. But anyway, he had an antenna on it, and he wasn't the captain, he was the pilot, but there was a captain on shore telling him what to do. So he was able to independently sail. Now, where would I have come across that except it was just randomly presented to me? And if I were to go to a website to read, I would just target in going, no, only show me tech.
Yeah. We used to get the Wall Street Journal when I was a kid, and so I would read. Wouldn't really read the Wall Street Journal so much for the Wall Street Journal, but back then that column was always, I think, down the center of the front page.
Yep.
And yes, I would read that every time because they were always great, and you just never knew what it was going to do. I do think that this sort of the curiosity is something that the people I've noticed it the most are in high-end academics. So I once had the opportunity to have brunch with Phil and Phyllis Morrison. Phil Morrison was one of the physicists who worked on the Manhattan Project.
Oh.
And I had a friend of mine at Cornell lived across the street from them growing up, and so they were friends with her. And we went to visit her after Cornell, and at some point, and she's like, "Oh, you got to come meet Phil and Phyllis." And I mean, little old people, but these people, they had, he had been one of the preeminent physicists of the 20th century, and oh my goodness, were they interested in everything?
Oh.
Just their condo in Cambridge, Massachusetts was just packed with stuff, and everything had a story behind it. And you know what wasn't there? No, they had a television, but it was small. It was like a 13-inch television, and they'd put a frame around it, like a theater, so it looked like a theater, and it had curtains that I think that you could pull, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, it was just one of those things where these people were so interesting, but even though preeminent physicists of the 20th century kind of thing, they were the ones asking all the questions.
Right.
They wanted to know what we were doing and what we were thinking.
Right.
Rather than telling us about their stuff, which truly interesting people.
One of the reasons I like to go on most of these big travel adventures we go on are with UCLA Travel, UCLA alumni, and the person who runs it was just delighted with what I said about it, and it's that when you travel with educated people, what you find is they're interesting and interested. You sit down, they're going to have something to say, but they're also going to want to know what you have to say. You don't get to just sit there and listen to a lecture. They're going to ask you what you know, and that's a fun environment to be in.
Yeah.
You don't have to be educated for that to be true, but that's just an example.
Yeah. And as I said, it's just so. I mean, to get back to the article, it was this funny realization to kind of feel as though I was updating just a way of thinking about the world with a very new tech analogy.
Yeah, and it's comforting too, like you said. I don't have to be able to regurgitate it. It's informing what I know and helping me develop these ideas and regurgitate, but it might not be precisely that Connecticut fungal thing.
I mean, I was always, I always really did I was intimidated by the concept that people could, quote Shakespeare from memory. I mean, I got a couple, to be or not to be, alas poor Yorick, but that's about it, right? I like Shakespeare. I've read a lot of Shakespeare. I've seen a lot of Shakespeare, but realistically, my weights on Shakespeare are you really shouldn't read it. You should see it, and you should see it by people who are doing a really good job. Because man, once we got to see the Royal Shakespeare Company, and wow, were they good? So
I love it.
That's it was just fun to be able to rejigger a little bit of the way that I analogized my life.
I love it. I'm going to make sure that Dr. Marianne Gary hears this. I think she'll get a big kick out of it. As always,
she can tell me all the ways I'm wrong.
Oh, she's real good at that. She calls herself the crusher of dreams. So I'm sure if she thinks you're wrong, we'll hear about it.
Wow.
All right, Adam, this was great fun. Everybody should be going to tidbits.com. They should be subscribing to the Tidbits newsletter. That's how I read everything I learn from Adam and the other contributors at Tidbits. And I hope everybody go check that out. Thank you again, Adam. We'll see you again soon.
Indeed. In the meantime, keep adjusting those weights.
Well, that's going to wind up this mammoth show for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? What about a dumb question? We haven't had any of those in a long time. If you have questions or a suggestion, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, go on over to podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack, and there you can talk to me and all of the other lovely Nosilla castaways. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/donate, like our heroes Kevin and John did for being snarky. Or you can go to podfeet.com/PayPal for a one-time payment. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, you are going to have to wait until April 5th to head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic Nosilla castaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.